This time on KEI Fabrication.
Alright folks, hopefully you can see what I'm trying to do here. I've got everything tacked in place. The exhaust system is supported and hung where it's going to stay. Hide all the women and children. Hide all the women and children. Hide all the women and children. All the grinding's done. Time to clean the garage. Well folks, I just came back from the scrapyard. So I ran up to the scrapyard. Well, we're up here at the junkyard. Well, we're back in the junkyard. Alright folks, so what I tried to do was I used a slightly smaller hole saw than the size tube that's going to fit inside here. As you saw, it was a little bit brutal because I didn't have the pilot drill engaged all the time, so it was twisting out of there. In case you're wondering, Milwaukee drill M18, $5 at a yard sale. So every once in a while you score like that. So my goal was to try to have the pipe tangent with this curve as it intersects, and hopefully the pipe that's on the truck right now will slide in here. I'm definitely going to have to use a burr machine and open this up so the diameter of the tube fits properly, and I'm just going to have to open it up a little bit. So I need 2 1/4 OD, and I'm at 2 inches 200 right now, so I'll have to use the burr machine to open this up, fit the tube properly. Have to see if I can find a piece of scrap tubing to make that tangency work out well. So again, this is all a prototype, but I think it'll work. We'll keep you posted on that as things develop. So folks, this is a piece of exhaust pipe. I junked a car recently. I saved the muffler, and this was attached to the muffler. So this is the right diameter. So you can see I'm not too far off. I knew I had to trim some because I am using a smaller hole saw than the actual diameter of the tube. So I'm going to go ahead. You can see I got to remove a little material to get it to drop down a little, make it a little wider so it slips in. Just fine-tune the opening here to get it to fit. I'm fairly encouraged so far. Well, there we go, folks. It's not a bad fit as far as being tangent to the curve, and I'll probably just open up the bottom of this a little bit to get it to drop down, and then once I get the flanges made, I'll go ahead and cut the exhaust system apart. I like it so far. We'll finish up the prototype here, and then we'll do the second one. Alright folks, hopefully you can see what my intention is. This will be the current exhaust system, the back end of it. This will slip over the front end. I've got the tube fit into the shape here. I was always trained that if your gap is larger than the diameter of the wire you're welding with, then the gap isn't good enough, or you need to either make a new piece or continue to fine-tune your joint. So I've got almost no gap all the way around, so I'm pretty happy with that. MIG welding's not quite as critical. TIG welding obviously is super critical, because when you got a gap, it'll actually pull the tube in the direction of the gap, and it'll twist things all out of shape. So I'm definitely going to be MIG welding this, but I do like and appreciate nice tight fits, and it'll minimize the opportunity to blow through a tube or just burn away material. So I'm going to work on making the flanges now. I'm going to use 3/16 material on the end of the flange, and then the caps that I put on I'm going to make out of 1/4 inch. And what I hope that does is that minimizes bending, and the gasket will seal good because the material thickness will stop warping and just minimize the opportunity for the gaskets to blow out. So that's my plan. We'll see how it goes. Alright folks, I'm just getting ready to make the flanges here. This is the 3/16 material that's actually going to be on the cutout on the that's going to remain on the truck, and sprayed it with bluing dye. I've got my gasket here as a template, so the this will slip over the pipe and then I'll weld it, and I'll use this nice thick gasket as my template to trace it out. And because I use bluing dye, I'll have a nice crisp line, and then I will use a transfer punch here to locate the holes. I haven't decided if I'm going to use a hole saw to cut through these, or what I do sometimes is I cut through the edge with the bandsaw, and then I cut the circle out of the bandsaw, and then just weld up the gap. That works. This may actually be a better opportunity to use that method, only because this is getting welded to the pipe anyway, so that welding up an additional part on the gap. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do there. Either way, it's just as quick, and it's pretty accurate to cut it on the bandsaw, so we'll see. Maybe I'll do one each way. So and the next thing I'll do is I'll use that same template out of the 1/4 inch material. This is the cap that's going to be on there, and I will go ahead and trace them out and cut them on the bandsaw as well. So like I've said before, whenever you have holes in your objects that you're cutting out of the bandsaw, you want to drill all your holes first, so you're holding a larger piece of material rather than a little tiny piece and trying to prevent it from spinning or lifting or rotating. It just goes quick, and when I've got all of these laid out, I can knock all the holes out with one operation in the drill press. So it's just less steps, physical steps, when you're walking from one piece of equipment to another. And you know, you've got a setup on one piece of equipment and a setup on the other. You run through that setup till you're done, and then you move on to the next. So just a little bit of manufacturing efficiency. So alright, I'm going to trace these out, and then I'm going to drill some holes, and then I will start cutting out the profiles. So there's the flanges for the cutout itself, and I'm going to use the gasket on the 1/4 inch thick material now. A couple things I just wanted to point out, folks. I made a third cap because you never know what's going to happen when you're going down the road. One could vibrate off and lose it. So I'll have another one thrown in the spare parts bin. The other thing is, when you're using a bandsaw, or I suppose any device that's cutting metal from patterns, you really want to make sure that you have a significant amount of space between each piece. For each piece, you want to make sure that your blade is cutting metal on both sides of the blade for every part. So I've got plenty of room here, so when I cut this one out, there will be enough material so I've got the blade cutting metal on both sides of the blade for each piece. So
I've adjusted my
what happens is
height
when you're trying to
of my
follow
guide,
contours
so
and
it
things,
is just slightly
if that
up
does
above
not
the
have
material, and what happens
material
is the
on both
closer
sides
the
of the
two
blade,
guides are
you'll
together,
cut through it, it'll jump,
the better you'll be
and
able
it's
to follow
really
the shape
difficult
of your
to
pattern,
stay on the line
because the blade is less prone to twist
and follow your
relative to
pattern.
what you're cutting.
So as much as you
I'm
would
gonna go
like
ahead
to
and cut these
bunch
out.
these things together and save
And,
material and things,
Here we go.
you're actually doing yourself a favor if you leave just a slight amount of material from the edge to the pattern in every area, and then certainly between pieces. Make sure
I got no excuses now.
you've got the
This
thickness
far
of the
along.
blade
The next step is to cut open
available to cut material on both sides of the cut line.
Alright, I know the women children.
I have to admit that hurt a little bit. The guy who built the exhaust is probably cringing.
Okay.
Ho, ho, ho. So, I'm happy about that. I think in the end result, this thing's going to be pretty cool. I got to leave it turned down enough so it misses the torsion bar. And I'm going to mark this pipe. And what I'll do is I'll leave like an 1/8 inch strong from this mark. The difficulty I see, I think I'm not going to have any choice but to undo the header flange up front, and the difficulty I see is being able to weld this all the way around. So unfortunately I'm going to have to take the header flange off, and I'll clean up the tube where the welds are going to go. I'll have to take this whole assembly, I'll tack it, take this whole assembly, drop it down so I can weld over the top side. If I undo the rear hanger, undo the header flange bolts, that shouldn't be an issue. I just hate disturbing gaskets that aren't leaking right now. Just to give you a little insight, so that right now is going to hang just a touch below the frame. So, but the drive shaft hoop is probably going to be flush with the bottom of the tube. It is flush with my cross member up front, so I'm okay with that. So let me just get an idea what's going to happen here. So my flanges will go on. I can rotate, because of the way things are going on here, I can rotate them up, and the caps will go on just like that. So that's the plan. So, and you call them cutouts, you can call them lake pipes, whatever you want. It's kind of what I'm in the business of building here. I have an opportunity to rotate these flanges a little bit, maybe pick up some ground clearance. I'll worry about that in a little while. The other thing this will do is the exhaust is going to be pointing towards the outside of the truck. Maybe it'll blow some of the burnout smoke away from the tires. I don't know. If it wasn't for the torsion bar being in the way, I could rotate them up even further, but I'll leave a good 3/8 of an inch clearance between the torsion bar and the tube. Again, if I have to do an angled cut to try to decrease the ground clearance, I think it'll be okay, because it's not the lowest point of the truck. It may look like it's low, and you'll definitely see it if you crawl under the truck. I think it'll be fine. Pretty happy so far. So I've cut the shape out that I scribed, and I left it like 1/8 of an inch strong. As much as I don't want any catch points to encourage the exhaust to go through the muffler. There's the turnout. I've got to have something back there so when I weld it there's a tiny bit of overlap, so I'm fully aware of that. I just did a rough cut now. I'll go back and I will take a grinding wheel and I'll remove as much of that as I dare, and that should minimize the catch point. So my theory is, just like water, exhaust takes the path of least resistance. So once I uncap or uncork the headers here, there'll be a tiny bit of back pressure that is created by the muffler, and that back pressure should encourage the air to turn even more. So obviously we'll know when we go from what it sounded like before I added these and what it sounds like when they're open. Obviously if it's super loud, then the exhaust is doing what we want it to do, and we're providing some additional unrestricted flow to the exhaust system. So that's the plan. I'm going to tinker around with fine-tuning all this stuff, and then get the other side situated, and then we will start tacking things together, and hopefully in another hour or two we can hear what this thing sounds like with the caps on and with the caps off. Alright folks, hopefully you can see what I'm trying to do here. I've got everything tacked in place. The exhaust system is supported and hung where it's going to stay, and the cutouts are in place. Got the flanges tacked on. Everything is just tacked now. I'm going to put a couple more tacks on now that I'm happy with the position of everything, and then I'm going to have to drop the connection at the header itself to be able to weld all the way around on this. So I'm going to do one more final check to make sure my tailpipes are where they need to be,
the mufflers are positioned properly, and then there's no undue stress on the exhaust system or any height discrepancies or anything like that. They look pretty cool, I think. A lot of work, but so there's what it looks like from the front of the engine. This right here is my shield for the LM7 truck oil pan, and if I go up high to get to the flush point, you can see that, well, hopefully you can see, those flanges are well above the lowest point of the chassis. Matter of fact, if I get up to the control arm section, they're even above those by a large margin. So the thing I like too is the perspective from over here. That looks pretty cool. You can see that the exhaust flow will miss the frame. I angled the cut a little bit as much as I could and still have the gasket have the entire mating surface. You can see that I'm down about half the diameter of the tube is sticking down below the stock exhaust. So as scary as it may look in other perspectives, that's about the best I can do with being flush with the bottom of the frame right there. So it sticks down maybe 2 inches below the frame. But there's a whole bunch of other things that stick down below the frame. So I'm going to position this 100%, weld it as much as I can in place, and then I'm going to drop the connection point at the header itself and weld the top sides, and then put it back together and fire it up. That's a sound I really fell in love with when I was a young kid. Can't wait to get the cam in so you can hear some potato, potato, potato in there too. I don't know if you noticed, but at an idle there's still a fair amount of exhaust passing through the mufflers. As soon as you start increasing the velocity and the flow, the pressure builds up in the mufflers, and then it becomes open headers. So it might not make any difference, in the first 2,000 RPM, but from 3,000 on, I think we got as unrestricted flow as we're ever going to get in this situation. We'll cap it off, and then I've got some dinner with some friends tonight I'm going to take the truck to. Alright, that's pretty satisfying. I just finished the exhaust cutouts. I don't know if you'll be able to see them in the dark here. There they are. No leaks. The truck's back to nice and quiet. Now we'll start picking away at the rest of this list. Next time on KEI Fabrication. Alright folks, one of the things that I thought was going to be important for going on the road in drag week is to have the ability to recharge electronic devices, cameras, and those sort of things. So my plan now is to throw in one of these power outlet supply ports. This is the dual port one.